Okay, hey, this is Roy. Obviously, I'm at the end of the my crazy trip to Georgia. The thing I'm calling the Odyssey. You know, it all started with Wayne and Roy, and then the Fast and Furious gang at the little town. Then the little Indian lady at the motel, and the Waffle House lady, and the two Deliverance fellows inside the Waffle House, and then the stranger I called there in that town, and then the little fellow with the bent up arm that took me to the town where I could get a rental car. So he dropped me off there that morning, like 10 o'clock. I think they opened it like 10:30 or something. So I got there pretty early. I got there early enough that I could get, I thought I could get everything squared away. So I get over there and I got, I was sitting there waiting on the curb there, for the lady to come out, or the person to come and open the place up so I could get one of those cars and get the heck out of there. And, I was feeling pretty nervous, and I had been through quite a lot, and, I was ready to have some my control over my life, and for the first time in a couple of days. And so I'm sitting there on the curb, and I hear this, I hear some hollering over in the parking lot. Off to the right, there was a strip mall. This rental car place was in a strip mall that went down and kind of made a little left. It was kind of a L-shaped little strip mall there. And on the end of the strip mall, there was obviously it was a little church that would meet there. They probably rented that space, for the church. And I heard this lady hollering in the parking lot. She has her phone and she's just yelling in her phone. She's yelling, turn left and then go right. The street, you've been here 10 times. Go to the street and turn, and then come down the other road. Now, I told you to get that. No, oh, there you just passed the place. I just saw you go by. And she's yelling in her phone. She's holding her phone like this, and she's yelling. I just saw you going by. Oh, my goodness. And she's a big gal, She had her Sunday dress on. She comes clumping across there in her shoes, right in front of me. Right out in the road, on the side of the road there. And she's yelling in her phone again. She's, turn around, come back. Can you see me? And she's waving her arm in the air. And she's hollering, get right here, right here. And they turn in there. And then she runs over there to where they are. And she yelling. It was a girl and a guy. She's yelling at the girl, you've been here 10 times. Now, you're late now. And they go in there in the church. I mean, this whole thing was just a surreal experience for me. Moment after moment of craziness. I think those people they must have really needed some church real bad. They may have been trying to avoid going, to purposely drive by the place. I don't know. So I'm sitting there for another 20, 30 minutes, and this lady shows up to open up the rental car place. And she says, she asked me, are you here for the car? I said, yeah. She goes, okay, give me a minute to get things fired up in here and come on in. I'll wave you in there. I said, okay. So a couple minutes go by, and I can see her in there, and she kind of waves me inside the store, inside the little office area there, and had some chairs sitting around there. What it would look like. And I go in there, and I sit down in that chair, and for the first time in a couple of days, I felt like, what? Maybe I'm gonna have some control here. Maybe I'm going to be able to make some decisions, and go. I think I can. I think this is going to work. So I'm sitting there, and she's, well, what kind of car? I said, whatever, a car that goes. And she goes, well, we got the mid-size thing out here, and I think it was a Mitsubishi, something with a V6, I think. Had a pretty good sized motor, as you'll hear later. But I go, I get, everything goes through, my card and all that stuff. And I tell her, I said, it's a one-way deal. I'm going to drop it off. She goes, okay, you drop it off at the airport up there. And I said, all right, okay. So I go out there and she's looking at the car and she's, you know how they do, they walk around, they check out everything to make sure there's no scratches or dents or anything. And I'm like, whatever, let's go. Let me get out of here. So I signed the paperwork. She gives me the paperwork. She says, fill it up. You know the spiel. Folks, she gives me that key. I hopped in that car. They shut that door. And man, it was like I was revived. But I was revived with still an overwhelming urge to get home as fast as I can. I became obsessed at that moment with getting home. That's all I could think of. I was in a state, just not a panicky state, but sort of like a fight or flight state. Because like I said before in the earlier sections of this, is I'd been suffering from some depression, and sometimes it can manifest itself in ways like that, and where you get yourself into position, and then you get kind of you kind of want to get out, and you really don't know what's happening because of your depression. But I don't want to get too much into that. But anyway, I get in this car. Now it was 830 miles to the house. Should have taken me almost 13 hours. I did it 9 hours. Folks, when I pulled out of that parking lot, from the time I pulled out of that parking lot to the time I got to Kansas City, there were only a few times when I was anywhere near the speed limit. How I didn't get pulled over I don't know. I was moving at a ridiculous rate of speed. I'm not proud of this at all, and I don't recommend it to anybody. Any lunatic who thinks they want to try to duplicate this is you're on your own. That's not. It was just. This was not a thing a person in control of their faculties would do. This is a thing that somebody who's having some depression issues, and has put themselves in a position where they, need to try to get out and try to revive themselves, with the lack of a better phrase or word to put it. But anyway, I took off out of that place, guys, and I don't remember any of the states I went through. I only remember Tennessee, because I glanced off to my left. I think I was on I-24. I glanced off to my left, and I saw the Tennessee Titans Stadium. It said Tennessee Titans on it. And I said, I must be in Tennessee. I was locked on the road, focused on the traffic to such a high level that I didn't even see anything else around except for the cars I was passing. And I went through, I think, Kentucky, a bit of Mississippi, some of Iowa. No, Illinois, because I went up. I came up through St. Louis, and I was just following whatever the GPS on my phone was saying. And I'm telling you guys, it was twice during this trip that I went 100, just shy of 100 miles an hour for an hour. So I went 100 miles in an hour, twice. Now, again, it's not something you hear every day, but that's 100 miles an hour for one full hour. Now, I wasn't going 100 miles an hour for that hour. I was going 125, 130, 110, 115, 120 for an hour. Hard to believe, but folks, it happened. I was locked on the road laser focused on the road. And I think that my body and my mind just kind of got tripped into a second gear. That's something that happens when you're in a very dangerous, stressful situation. Maybe, you're stuck out in the woods, or you're out in the desert, or you're trying to get away from some wild creature or something, and everything in you is heightened, and your vision and everything else is. I mean, that's the only thing I can explain it, because that's the only way I can explain it. Because there were a couple times where I remember I was going through a mountainous area. Again, I don't remember anything about the states except for Tennessee. I was going through a mountainous area, and it was snowing. It started snowing, and I was doing 95 and 100 miles an hour in the snow. I mean, I was flying, people. I was covering ground. I remember one instance where I was in the right lane. There was a truck in front of me, and there was a car on the left lane, and I was trying to pass him on the slow lane side. And I came around the car on the left, and the truck was right there. The semi was right there. And I had to change lanes real quick, and when I changed lanes and come across in front of the car that was in the fast lane again, I was in the slow lane. When I came across at 95 or 100, I felt the back of the car sliding a little out. And I remember that I just held onto the wheel real lightly, because, I drive race cars, and I've done all manner of very fast motorized vehicles. I used to stand up on the seat of my motorcycle at 70 miles an hour down the highway. I've always had really good control over machinery. And, I knew that if I did anything more than just look at the steering wheel, I was going to wreck. And the car slid sideways, and the back tire kind of caught that rumble strip, and it kind of corrected itself, and I continued on. That was the only point during the trip where I felt like I was going to lose it there. So I just kept on flying. I mean, I was just flying. And what I'd do is I would see where there was gas, and I would pull into the gas station, and I would just skid to a stop at the pump. I would stick the pump in there, start pumping. I would run. I mean, literally run into the store, get everything that was around, anything that was around the counter, and a drink, chips and whatever. And then I would pay for it and run out. And by the time I got out there, the pump would have been almost stopped. Threw the food in there. When the pump was stopped, I took the nozzle out, threw it at the pump, got in the car, and took off. I bet I wasn't there 5 minutes at any gas stop. Well, I had to go to the bathroom probably once or twice, one or two of the stops, so I did that as fast as I could. I didn't wear a diaper like that pilot or that astronaut did or anything like that. I wasn't that crazy there. So I'm buzzing down there, and I mean, I remember going 130 several times, 125 routinely. Again, how I didn't see cops, I don't know. How I didn't wreck, I don't know. How I didn't cause a wreck, I don't know. When I would go under underpasses, bridges, I would glance back real quick at the entrance ramp, and if I didn't see a car up there, I was going. I was looking over my shoulder all the time. This was Sunday. This was the middle of Sunday, so there wasn't a whole lot of people out, luckily. And I mean, I was just in another place. I mean, I was totally in another place. Flying. I don't know how that car held together. But I remember that I knew I was in Missouri because I had gone through St. Louis. Man, I came down I-70. I don't know how long it took me to get from from St. Louis to Kansas City, but not long. I came around and I got in front of the house here, and I brought that car to a halt. I had to park out front there, and I was going to take it to the airport in the morning to drop it off. And it was dark now. And man, I shut that thing off. First time I turned it off since I got in it at the rental car place. I shut that thing off. Man, it smelled like burnt brakes, and it was making, crackling noises from the heat. I mean, this thing, I don't recommend you renting a Mitsubishi, whatever it was from, I'm not going to say the rental place, but any rental place. It might be the one I drove. So, man, I came up to the door, opened up the door, came in the house, put all my stuff down, went upstairs, took a shower, climbed into bed, glad I was home. But that's the story of my crazy trip to Georgia and my wild drive home. A little over 9 hours, 9 point something, I think. Averaging 85 miles an hour, I think, over the trip. I did some rough math, but yeah. It was my own personal cannonball run. Again, anybody that might hear this, don't think, oh, that guy's, yeah, that's cool. There's nothing cool about it. It was reckless and dangerous. But it's only a thing that somebody does if they're having some problems, if they're having some emotional issues, really. I know people have done the cannonball run and all that kind of stuff, and that's cool. And, back in the 70s, if I'd have been able to, I might have done one of those. But I do not recommend this at all. I don't drive like that on the road. I drive the speed limit. I'm just a normal, everyday person on the road. But that day I was in an altered state. But I got home, and here I am. And from that point on, from the time I got home until here in the last month or so, I've been able to work through these issues of my depression, and with help, I'm a whole lot better. But I just kind of want to share this story. It was an amazing story, and I can't tell it well enough to get the whole thing across. Really, I don't think the characters are probably more than what I actually described. Amazing, quite an amazing story. I'll never forget it. And I think it's what eventually led me to, recovering from my depression and getting myself finally seeing, down the road that I needed to do something. So that's my story. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you kind of gives you an insight a little bit. You guys have a good evening. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.